The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Willow Creek Lane as Marcus Johnson, a respected cardiologist at Memorial Hospital, arranged platters of seasoned chicken on the grill. His wife, Tanya, an elementary school principal with 20 years of dedicated service, carefully arranged fresh fruit on a wooden platter. Their teenage children, Zara and Leo, hustled between the kitchen and backyard, carrying bowls of potato salad and pitchers of lemonade. The Johnsons had lived in the Oak Ridge subdivision for 7 years, their Tudor-style home meticulously maintained with flower beds that had twice won neighborhood gardening awards. "Dad, can we invite the Hendersons?" Their kids just got back from summer camp, Leo asked, adjusting his glasses. Marcus nodded, "Of course. The more the merrier. That's why we bought this place, right? Big yard, perfect for gatherings." Tanya smiled as she surveyed their spacious backyard where string lights crisscrossed overhead, ready to illuminate the evening. This was their first neighborhood cookout since Marcus's promotion, a casual celebration among friends. At 4:30 p.m., the first guests arrived, coworkers and neighbors they'd known for years. The grill sizzled as conversation and laughter filled the air. No one noticed the unmarked police car that pulled up across the street, or the 2 officers watching from a distance. No one, except Mrs. Vance from 3 houses down, who had made the call. By 5:15 p.m., as Marcus was serving his famous barbecue ribs, 3 police cruisers suddenly flanked the Johnson residence, lights flashing. 6 officers approached with hands near their holsters. "What's happening?" Tanya whispered, instinctively moving closer to her children. The lead officer stepped forward. "We've received reports of trespassing and disturbing the peace at this address." The gathering fell silent. Marcus stepped forward, hands visible at his sides. "Officers, this is my home. We live here," he stated firmly but calmly, years of delivering difficult news to patients evident in his measured tone. "May I ask what's going on?" Officer Brennan, a veteran with 17 years on the force, scanned the yard full of professionally dressed adults and children clutching paper plates. His partner, Officer Torres, checked her notes with growing confusion. "We received a complaint about unauthorized individuals hosting a party at 47 Willow Creek Lane," Officer Torres explained, her brow furrowed. The caller claimed there might be illegal activity. Dr. Raymond Chen, Marcus's colleague from cardiology, stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. The Johnsons have lived here for years. I've been coming to their home since 2018. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the guests. Tanya pulled out her driver's license, displaying their address. Several neighbors voiced their outrage at the obvious false report. Within minutes, most officers recognized the error and began to withdraw, but the damage was done. Children huddled near their parents. The festive atmosphere had evaporated like morning dew under harsh sunlight. Later that evening, as neighbors helped clean up, Marcus discovered this wasn't the first incident. The Washingtons, who lived 2 streets over, described a similar experience during their daughter's graduation party. The Turners recounted police questioning them while moving in furniture. All black families. All reported by anonymous callers. By morning, the story had spread through community group chats and social media. Security camera footage from the Johnsons' doorbell showed the officers' approach from multiple angles. The comments section exploded with outrage and division. "This has to stop," Tanya declared, scrolling through her phone at the breakfast table. "Someone's deliberately targeting black families in Oak Ridge. And using police as their weapon," added Marcus grimly, watching his children pick at their untouched breakfast. 2 streets away, Mrs. Vance peered through her curtains, nervously observing the increased traffic past her house as community members gathered at the Johnson home. Zara Johnson, despite her parents' concerns, wasn't one to remain silent. The 17-year-old honor student had already compiled a spreadsheet by Monday morning. She'd texted every black student at Oak Ridge High, collecting dates, addresses, and details of similar incidents. 23 separate police calls in the last 8 months, she announced, presenting her findings to her parents and 5 other families gathered in their living room. Every single one targeting black or brown homeowners. None resulted in arrests because there was never anything illegal happening. Wesley Turner, an IT specialist who'd moved to Oak Ridge just 3 months ago, pulled up neighborhood security footage he'd collected. The same 4 vehicles appear near the scenes before most incidents, he pointed out on his laptop. Including this gray sedan that belongs to Mrs. Vance. Marcus contacted Captain Rivera at the police department, a former patient who'd always treated him with respect. "This is deeply concerning, Dr. Johnson," the captain acknowledged, reviewing the evidence. "These calls waste department resources and put innocent citizens at risk." The next day, reporters from the local news station arrived. Ariel Washington, now a journalism major home from college, had written a compelling editorial that caught media attention. As cameras rolled, family after family recounted their experiences. At the station, Captain Rivera ordered an audit of all calls from the Oak Ridge area. The pattern became undeniable. A small group of residents had been systematically reporting their black neighbors for ordinary activities, gardening, exercising, hosting gatherings, even bringing in groceries. "What's most disturbing," Rivera told his officers during an emergency briefing, "is how our department became an unwitting tool in this harassment campaign." The Oak Ridge Community Center buzzed with tension as residents filled every seat. At the front, Mayor Patel tried to maintain order as voices rose and fell like stormy waves. This emergency town hall, originally scheduled for the smaller library conference room, had been moved twice to accommodate the swelling crowd. "One at a time, please," Mayor Patel urged, her gavel tapping steadily. Marcus Johnson stood at the microphone, medical credentials visible on his lanyard from his rushed arrival straight from hospital rounds. "My family has endured 3 police visits in 7 years for doing nothing more than existing in our home," he stated, voice unwavering. "Our children now feel unsafe in the neighborhood we chose for its supposed safety." Mrs. Vance shifted uncomfortably in her seat as several eyes turned toward her and the small cluster of older residents in her row. William Chen, whose family had lived in Oak Ridge for 20 years, approached the microphone next. "My parents faced similar discrimination when they first moved here. I promised myself things would be different for my children. We've failed them." The room fell silent when Zara Johnson stepped up, clutching printed copies of her research. "This isn't about misunderstandings," she declared, passing the documents to council members. "This is organized harassment, and we have proof." Captain Rivera confirmed the police findings, which had identified 8 residents responsible for over 50 baseless calls. Surprisingly, Frank Donnelly, a retired judge living across from the Turners, stood up. "I've witnessed this happening and said nothing. I'm ashamed of my silence. We cannot claim to be a community while allowing our neighbors to be terrorized." Mrs. Vance suddenly rose. The room tensed as she approached the microphone. "I made those calls," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I convinced others to do the same." Gasps rippled through the audience. "Why?" Tanya Johnson asked directly, standing from her seat. Their eyes met across the crowded room. "Because you didn't fit my idea of who belongs here," Mrs. Vance answered, tears streaming down her lined face. "I was wrong. Terribly wrong." The following weeks transformed Oak Ridge. After the town hall revelation, the district attorney's office launched a formal investigation into the targeted harassment. Mrs. Vance and 4 others faced charges for filing false police reports, misuse of emergency services, and civil rights violations. "This isn't about punishment alone," District Attorney Levinson explained at the press conference. "It's about setting a clear precedent that weaponizing law enforcement against people of color will not be tolerated." The police department instituted new protocols requiring dispatchers to flag and scrutinize repeated calls from the same individuals targeting specific addresses. Captain Rivera personally apologized to each family and implemented mandatory bias training for all officers. Most surprising was the community response. 73 households joined to create the Oak Ridge Inclusion Coalition, with monthly meetings rotating between homes. When the Washingtons hosted the first gathering, attendance exceeded all expectations. Judge Donnelly, stepping into his role as unexpected ally, proposed a community restoration fund. Those harmed deserve more than apologies, he insisted, writing the first substantial check himself. On a sunny Saturday, Marcus watched from his porch as Mrs. Vance approached, accompanied by her court-appointed counselor. Their restorative justice agreement required her to complete community service hours under the Johnson family's direction. "I'm here to help with the garden," she said softly. Unable to meet his eyes, Tanya nodded toward the flower beds they'd planned for the community park. "We're planting together today. All of us." For the first time, Mrs. Vance noticed the diverse group of neighbors working side by side, children handing tools to adults, teenagers designing the layout. She rolled up her sleeves and stepped forward to join them. 1 year later, the Johnsons hosted another barbecue. The yard overflowed with neighbors from every corner of Oakridge. Children played tag between adults engaged in animated conversations. The community garden project, now thriving in the park, had won regional recognition. Local news crews captured the celebration as Mayor Patel unveiled a new street sign, Unity Way, the renamed entrance to their subdivision. The Oakridge case had inspired state legislation making bias-motivated false reporting a specific offense. Zara, now preparing for college, had turned her spreadsheet into an app that communities nationwide were adopting to track and address similar patterns. Mrs. Vance stood near the grill, serving sides alongside Marcus. The months of working together had slowly transformed suspicion into understanding, then grudging respect, and eventually, something approaching friendship. As evening fell and lights twinkled overhead, Tanya raised her glass. To neighbors becoming family, she toasted. Leo, wiser beyond his years, added quietly, and to justice that heals, not divides. The gathered community, black, white, Asian, Latino, young, elderly, raised their glasses in unison under the peaceful summer sky.